Hey there, history enthusiasts. If you're drifting into the past with me tonight, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Let me know what other quiet corners of time you'd like to explore. It's just you, me, and the soft glow of candlelight as we step into the world of a Renaissance printer's shop, where the rhythm of ink and paper whispered secrets of innovation across 15th and 16th century Europe. Imagine, if you will, the gentle hum of Venice's canals lapping at the edges of a narrow workshop, or the steady flow of the Rhine River brushing past the walls of a shop in Mainz. Here, in these cradles of printing, artisans moved with the quiet precision of craftsmen shaping the future. Picture them in their linen smocks, soft and worn from years of use, the fabric whispering against their skin as they leaned over trays of lead type. The air carried a faint, earthy scent of ink mixed with the musty aroma of aging paper, a blend that lingered like a comforting dream. In these spaces, the day began with the first light filtering through dusty windows, casting long shadows that danced across wooden presses, creaking softly under the weight of history. Aldus Manutius, that ingenious figure from Venice, left us glimpses in his records, notes scribbled in the margins of his ledgers, detailing the orderly chaos of the print shop. He spoke of men and women, though their names often faded into obscurity, who arranged letters with fingers stained a deep, velvety black from handling fresh ink. These artisans were not mere laborers. They were guardians of knowledge, their movements a ballet of repetition and care. In Mainz, where Gutenberg's legacy echoed through the beams, printers worked in similar harmony, their shops filled with the subtle clink of type pieces sliding into place, each sound a soft punctuation to the day's work. The life of a printer unfolded in layers of sensory detail, wrapping around you like a warm blanket on a cool evening. The ink, warm and viscous as it was poured from clay pots, left trails on fingertips that never quite washed away, a badge of their craft that spoke of dedication without a word. You might hear the gentle press of a wooden lever, its creak like a distant sigh, as pages were imprinted one by one. The rooms themselves were dimly lit, with candles flickering to reveal stacks of paper piled high, their edges rough and inviting to the touch. In Venice, the salty breeze from the lagoon would mingle with the smoky haze from oil lamps, creating an atmosphere that was both invigorating and serene. Mainz offered a different hush, with the river's murmur seeping through cracks in the walls, accompanying the rhythmic thump of the press as it transformed blank sheets into vessels of ideas. These shops were sanctuaries of innovation, where the craft of printing evolved with graceful subtlety. Aldus Manutius, ever the visionary, refined techniques that made books more accessible, his archives revealing how printers experimented with fonts and layouts in the quiet hours before dawn. They cast type from molten lead, the metal cooling with a satisfying click, each piece a tiny marvel of engineering. The process demanded patience, a slow dance where every letter was placed by hand, ensuring that words flowed like a gentle stream across the page. In these moments, the printer's world was one of quiet triumph, where the innovation of movable type spread knowledge far and wide. From scholarly tomes to simple pamphlets that found their way into the hands of merchants and scholars alike, sensory memories abound in the archives. The faint, acrid tang of smoke from the forges where type was made, blending with the sweeter scent of drying ink that filled the air like a whispered promise. Imagine the cool press of metal types against your palm, their edges smooth from constant handling, or the soft rustle of paper as it was fed into the machine. In Venice, the workshops might have echoed with the distant calls of gondoliers, a lullaby that harmonized with the printer's steady work. Mainz, with its forested surroundings, brought in hints of pine and earth, grounding the artisans in the natural world, even as they pushed the boundaries of human ingenuity. These details, preserved in Manutius' meticulous notes, paint a picture of a life devoted to beauty and precision, where each printed page was a testament to the human spirit's endless curiosity. Yet, amid this serene craft, there lies a gentle mystery that adds a layer of intrigue to the narrative, like a soft fog rolling over the canals. Many of these printers, the unsung architects of the Renaissance, left no trace of their names in the records. Aldus Manutius himself documented the processes, but often omitted the individuals who toiled beside him, their identities dissolving into the ether of time. Why were these artisans, whose hands shaped the very foundations of modern knowledge, so frequently unrecorded? Perhaps it was the humble nature of their work, or the era's focus on patrons and inventors like Gutenberg and Manutius, leaving the everyday craftsmen as shadows in the background. In Venice and Mainz, archives whisper of anonymous figures who perfected techniques in obscurity, their contributions echoing through history without credit. It's a subtle enigma, one that invites reflection on the quiet heroes whose fingerprints, quite literally inked onto pages, influenced generations, yet remain nameless. As the day waned in these shops, the printers would clean their tools with cloth rags, the scent of oil and ink lingering as a reminder of their labor. The presses stood silent then, wooden frames settling into rest, while the artisans stepped out into the fading light, perhaps sharing a quiet word over a simple meal. In Venice, they might have walked along the piazzas, the evening air cool against their skin, or in Mainz, strolled by the river's edge, the water's gentle flow mirroring the steady pace of their lives. This was the essence of their world, a blend of craftsmanship and innovation, woven into the fabric of everyday existence. Through it all, the printer's legacy endures, a calming thread in the tapestry of history. Their shops were more than workplaces. They were cradles of thought, where ideas took form in the soft press of ink on paper. Drawing from Manutius' archives, we see how these spaces fostered a sense of wonder, turning raw materials into enduring works that still whisper to us today. And as we linger here, in this peaceful corner of the past, let's prepare to turn the page, moving gently toward the next chapter of our journey, where other stories await in the quiet folds of time, in the quiet hum of Basel's printing houses, where the air carried the faint, earthy scent of fresh ink and aged parchment. Erasmus of Rotterdam sat hunched over a wooden desk, clad in simple wool robes that whispered softly with each movement. Their course weave a familiar comfort against the chill of the northern winds. He wielded a quill with deliberate grace, the feathers scratched rhythmically against the paper, a gentle cadence like distant rain on a thatched roof, while candlelight flickered across the page, casting warm, dancing shadows that softened the edges of his scholarly world. It was here, amid the orderly stacks of manuscripts and the subdued clatter of presses in the adjacent rooms, that Erasmus devoted himself to the meticulous art of editing, shaping the words of ancient thinkers into forms that could illuminate the minds of his contemporaries. Born in 1466 in the modest town of Rotterdam, where the Rhine's tributaries murmured through flat, green landscapes, Erasmus emerged from humble beginnings that belied his future influence. His early years were marked by the loss of his parents to the plagues that swept Europe, a shadow that lingered without bitterness, merely as a quiet undercurrent to his pursuits, raised in the care of guardians who recognized his sharp intellect. He entered the monastic schools of the Low Countries, where the scent of beeswax candles and the rustle of turning pages first kindled his passion for learning. In those dim cloisters, with sunlight filtering through stained glass in hazy beams, he devoured the classics Plato, Cicero, and Seneca, transcribing passages in his neat hand, the ink's metallic tang lingering on his fingers long after the day's work ended. As the years unfolded, Erasmus wandered across Europe, his travels a tapestry of intellectual discovery rather than mere adventure. He crossed the Channel to England in the 1490, where the rolling hills and misty mornings offered a respite for reflection. There, in the company of fellow scholars like Thomas More, he engaged in lively exchanges that sparked his own writings, though he always returned to the core of his work, the careful revision and annotation of texts. Back in Basel by 1514, he found a haven in the bustling yet serene printing houses of Johann Froben, where the steady rhythm of the presses provided a backdrop to his solitary labors. Seated under a low-beamed ceiling, the wood polished smooth by years of use, Erasmus would pause to dip his quill into a clay pot of ink, the liquid's glossy surface catching the flame's glow, before resuming his edits with unwavering focus. His intellectual endeavors centered on restoring the purity of classical and biblical texts, a pursuit that demanded endless patience and precision. He pored over manuscripts of the New Testament, comparing ancient copies with a scholar's eye, his quill tracing corrections in a flow as steady as a heartbeat. The room around him was alive with subtle sensations. The warm wax of melting candles releasing a sweet, honeyed aroma. The occasional draft carrying whispers of turning pages from nearby workstations, and the faint creak of his chair as he shifted, his wool robes brushing against the desk's edge. In these moments, Erasmus embodied the Renaissance ideal, a bridge between the ancient world and his own, his edits breathing new life into forgotten wisdom. He compiled vast collections, such as his editions of Plutarch and Pliny, each page a testament to his belief in the power of clear, accessible knowledge to elevate the human spirit. Yet amid this dedication, there lingered a gentle enigma, the mystery of his unwritten diaries. Though Erasmus corresponded prolifically, his letters, a rich vein of insight into his thoughts, preserved in collections that reveal his wit and warmth. He never committed a personal journal to paper. One might imagine him, late at night when the printing house grew still, the last candle sputtering in its holder, contemplating the day's reflections. Did he fear the vulnerability of such records? Or perhaps see them as unnecessary distractions from his greater works? His letters, addressed to friends like Beatus Reninus, hint at this silence, with phrases like, "I leave the daily trivialities to the winds," suggesting a deliberate choice to guard his inner world. This absence invites speculation, a soft puzzle that adds depth to his legacy, as if the very act of not writing preserved a private sanctuary, untouched by the ink that flowed so freely elsewhere. Throughout his years in Basel, Erasmus's routine was one of quiet rhythm, a life measured in the turning of pages rather than the ticking of clocks. He rose with the dawn, the city's bells tolling softly through the mist-shrouded streets, and made his way to the printing house, where the morning light gradually filled the room, warming the air and illuminating his workspace. His edits were not mere corrections. They were acts of creation, weaving together threads of history and philosophy with the deftness of a weaver at a loom. He annotated margins with notes in his precise Latin, the quill's tip gliding smoothly, leaving behind trails of thought that sparkled like dew on grass. Sensory memories infused his work. The cool touch of the parchment under his fingers, the subtle grit of sand used to blot ink, and the distant murmur of apprentices conversing in low tones, their voices a soothing undercurrent to his concentration. Historical examples from his letters illustrate this commitment. In one missive to a fellow humanist, he described the joy of uncovering a pristine copy of Livy's histories, as if finding a long-lost friend in a crowded hall. His words evoking the thrill of discovery that propelled his revisions. Another letter recounts the frustration of a flawed manuscript, where errors crept like shadows at dusk, prompting him to labor late into the evening, the candle's flame casting elongated reflections on the walls. These glimpses, drawn from his correspondence, paint a portrait of a man whose intellectual pursuits were both rigorous and deeply personal, a soothing counterpoint to the era's turbulence. As the decades passed, Erasmus's influence grew, his edited texts spreading across Europe like ripples on a tranquil lake. He remained in Basel through the 1520, a period of fruitful productivity where the printing presses hummed with his projects. The wool of his robes, worn thin from constant use, became a symbol of his unassuming dedication, its fibers softened by time and touch. Even in moments of weariness, when the quill's scratches grew faint and the candlelight dimmed, he pressed on, driven by an inner light that needed no external flame. Yet, as with all lives, there were undertones of transience, the loss of colleagues to illness passed with a detached acknowledgement, a simple note in his letters of their contributions enduring beyond them. Erasmus himself, feeling the weight of years by the 1530, continued his work with undiminished zeal, his routines a balm against the passage of time. In his final days, back in Freiburg and then Basel, he reflected on his legacy, the mystery of his unwritten diaries, perhaps his last quiet jest, a reminder that some thoughts are best left to the ether. And so, as the printing house fell silent with the setting sun, one might envision Erasmus laying down his quill, the day's edits complete, and gazing out at the city lights twinkling like distant stars. His story, woven from letters and labors, fades into the night, leaving room for what follows, the echoes of innovation in other corners of the world, where new minds await their turn to shape the dawn. In the dim glow of a 15th century workshop, where motes of dust danced lazily in shafts of afternoon light, printers moved with quiet purpose, their tunics frayed and ink stained from years of labor. The air hung heavy with the earthy scent of freshly mixed inks, a blend of oil and pigment that whispered secrets of ancient recipes passed down through generations. Parchment pages rustled softly as hands, calloused and steady, aligned them for binding, each flutter a gentle sigh echoing the birth of knowledge in an era when books were still rare treasures. Fragile as autumn leaves, these early printed volumes, known as incunabula, emerged from the cradles of Europe's burgeoning print houses, nestled in cities like Mainz, Venice, and Paris. Imagine a craftsman, his brow furrowed in concentration, dipping a wooden block into a vat of black ink that gleamed like midnight pools. The ink's sharp, metallic tang filled the room, mingling with the faint, woody aroma of oak galls used in its making, creating a symphony of scents that soothed the soul even as it evoked the passage of time. In these dusty shops, with shelves lined by half-finished tomes and tools scattered like forgotten relics, the mystery of lost incunabula began to weave its enigmatic tale. Historians, poring over faded library catalogues from institutions such as the British Library and the Vatican Archives, have long puzzled over the whereabouts of these vanished editions. One such enigma involves the elusive copies of the 42-line Bible, attributed to Johannes Gutenberg around 1455. Though records from archaeological reports, like those from excavations in Mainz, suggest that not all prints survived the turbulent decades that followed. These books, bound in simple leather covers that creaked under the touch, were meant to endure. Yet many slipped into oblivion, their pages perhaps succumbing to the damp cellars of forgotten monasteries or the flames of regional conflicts. Consider the sensory world of these workshops. The cool, smooth texture of vellum under fingertips, derived from calfskin, prepared with meticulous care. Its surface whispering tales of the animals from which it came. The printers worked by candlelight, the flames flickering and casting elongated shadows that played across the walls, while the soft thud of a mallet securing bindings resonated like a distant heartbeat in the air. A subtle wit lingered in the way these artisans might chuckle over a misaligned letter, a minor flaw that, in hindsight, added to the charm of imperfection. Amidst the quest for precision, the mystery deepens when one examines the unknown fates of lesser-known incunabula, such as the missing editions from Nicholas Jensen's Venetian press in the 1470 catalogues from the Bibliotheca Nazionale Marciana in Venice. Note gaps in collections, where reports of archaeological digs along the Adriatic coast have uncovered fragments, mere scraps of illuminated margins, or faded woodcut illustrations that hint at volumes long since lost. These fragments, when handled, release a faint, musty perfume of aged paper and decayed bindings, a olfactory echo of stories untold. Why did they disappear? Perhaps they were claimed by the chaos of the Italian wars, where armies marched through cities, leaving trails of destruction that spared neither art nor literature. Or maybe they fell victim to the simple ravages of time, as dampness seeped into storage chests, warping pages that once crackled with the vitality of new ideas. In those days, the process of binding a book was a ritual of patience and skill. A printer might select cords of linen, their fibers rough yet resilient, to sew the gatherings together. The rhythmic pull of thread through paper, producing a series of soft, satisfying clicks that blended into the workshop's ambient hush. The Inkai air, thick and comforting, carried traces of rosemary or lavender added to the mixtures for preservation, offering a calming herbal undertone that belied the uncertainties beyond the shop's walls. Archaeological evidence from sites like Erfurt in Germany reveals tools and remnants that speak of this craft. Awls and needles preserved in soil, their metal surfaces tarnished, but evocative of hands that once wielded them with grace. Yet, for all the tranquility of these scenes, the loss of incunabula carries a quiet sorrow. Library catalogues, such as those compiled by the Incunabula Short Title Catalog, list hundreds of entries marked as unlocated. Their descriptions drawn from contemporary inventories that survive in archives across Europe. One poignant example is the disappearance of early medical treatises from the press of Johann Mentelin in Strasbourg. Around 1470, reports from excavations at the site of the old Strasbourg Cathedral have yielded pottery shards inscribed with printing marks, suggesting that entire runs might have been destroyed in fires or floods, their pages reduced to ash that mingled with the earth's quiet repose. The consequences of such losses ripple through history, depriving us of insights into medieval science and philosophy. Yet, in a detached manner, one might appreciate the irony that in an age of preservation, some knowledge chose to fade like whispers in the wind. To grasp the scale of this mystery, envision a printer pausing to admire his work, the fresh ink drying to a matte finish that caught the light in subtle glimmers. The sensory details abound, the warmth of a brazier's glow on cold evenings, the faint grit of sand used to blot excess ink, leaving a textured residue underfoot. Historical examples, like the lost copies of Ptolemy's Geographia, printed in Rome in 1477, as noted in Vatican reports, illustrate how these books could vanish during the papacy's relocations, their bindings perhaps repurposed or discarded in the shadows of grander ambitions. Each loss adds a layer to the enigma, a puzzle pieced together from fragments and inferences, all while maintaining a calming distance from the events themselves. In the broader tapestry of 15th century Europe, the incunabular represented a bridge between the scribbled past and the printed future, their mysteries serving as gentle reminders of human fallibility. Sensory elements, such as the cool breath of wind through open windows, carrying the distant toll of bells, or the subtle creak of wooden presses under strain, enhance this narrative, drawing the listener into a world where every detail invites contemplation rather than alarm. Archaeological findings, including those from the Low Countries riverbeds, where waterlogged pages have been retrieved, underscore the fragility of these artifacts, their survival a matter of chance rather than design. As the day waned in those ancient shops, with the last rays of sunlight fading and the printers laying down their tools, the air settled into a peaceful stillness, heavy with the unspoken stories of what was lost. Yet, in this calm exploration, one cannot help but feel a subtle wit in the persistence of inquiry, as if the incunabula themselves whisper that some mysteries are meant to endure, drawing us ever onward. And so, from the rustle of parchment to the echo of absent pages, we prepare to turn our gaze to fresh horizons, where other tales await in the quiet folds of history. In the hushed heart of 15th century Venice, where the Grand Canal whispered secrets to ancient stones, a merchant's guild hall stood as a sanctuary of splendor. The air carried the faint scent of aged wood and distant spices, drawing one into its embrace like a lullaby from the lagoon. Here, amid the oak-paneled halls polished to a warm glow, men of commerce gathered in velvet cloaks that rustled softly with every measured step. Their voices, a gentle murmur over the clinking of coins and the soft press of wax seals. The Guildhall itself was a marvel of Venetian opulence, its walls lined with panels of dark oak carved by master craftsmen, each groove telling tales of bygone voyages. Sunlight filtered through arched windows of leaded glass, casting kaleidoscopic patterns on the floor like scattered jewels. Merchants arrived at dawn, their cloaks dyed in deep crimsons and indigos, draped over broad shoulders, the fabric heavy with the weight of prosperity. They moved with a quiet grace, their boots echoing faintly on the flagstones, as if the hall itself breathed in rhythm with the city's pulse. In these chambers, trade unfolded like a well-rehearsed dance. A merchant might settle at a long table, its surface scarred, yet gleaming from years of use, and unfurl a ledger bound in leather softened by time. The scent of ink and beeswax filled the air as documents were sealed with careful precision, the warm wax pooling like molten gold before cooling under the stamp of a signet ring. One could hear the subtle symphony, the clink of ducats exchanged in discreet handfuls, the whisper of parchment sliding across wood, and the occasional chuckle that hinted at a clever bargain struck. These men, with their beards trimmed neatly and rings glinting on their fingers, spoke of silks from the East and wines from Crete, their words laced with the subtle wit of those who knew the sea's caprices. Life in the Guildhall was a tapestry of ritual and refinement, woven with threads of sensory delight. The rooms were warmed by braziers that glowed like embers in a hearth, releasing the faint aroma of sandalwood and rosemary. Tapestries hung on the walls, depicting mythical scenes of abundance, ships laden with treasures, mermaids guarding pearl-laden shores, each thread a testament to the guild's wealth. At midday, servants would appear with trays of delicacies, figs plump with sweetness, cheeses aged to a creamy perfection, and goblets of Malmsey wine that slid down the throat like liquid velvet. The merchants paused then, their conversations softening to murmurs, as if savoring the moment's tranquility. Yet beneath this veneer of elegance lay the guild's intricate web of alliances and secrets. Men like Antonio Di Marco, a seasoned trader with eyes as sharp as the Adriatic's waves, would lean across the table, his voice a soothing cadence as he negotiated shipments of amber and ivory. His cloak, lined with fur that brushed against his skin like a gentle caress, spoke of journeys endured and fortunes made. Around him, others gathered, their faces illuminated by the flicker of candles. Tall beeswax pillars that dripped slowly, pooling into perfect circles on brass holders. The light danced across their features, highlighting the lines etched by years of bargaining under the Mediterranean sun. One could almost feel the history in the air, drawn from the archives of the Venetian Republic, where records of trade routes and tariffs were meticulously kept. The Guildhall's own archives, housed in a locked chamber off the main hall, held ledgers that chronicled the rise of Venice as a maritime empire. But here, amid the opulence, lingered a quiet mystery. The lost records of the Guild's founding years. It was said, in whispers that echoed like the lapping of water against gondolas, that certain volumes had vanished decades prior, perhaps spirited away during a storm-tossed night when the lagoon's winds howled like restless spirits. No one spoke of it openly, for such matters were handled with the same detached calm as a fading echo. But the absence weighed on the hall like a shadow at dusk. The mystery unfolded in subtle ways. A merchant might pause, his hand hovering over a stack of documents, and glance toward the locked door, wondering if the missing records held clues to forgotten routes or hidden alliances. Legends from the Venetian archives, such as those preserved in the State Inquisitor's notes, hinted at discrepancies, shipments logged but never delivered, names that appeared and then vanished from the rolls. It was a puzzle wrapped in the Guild's daily rhythm, a gentle enigma that added a layer of intrigue without disturbing the peace. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the hall grew dim, a senior member might muse aloud, his tone laced with wry humor. Ah, if only those pages could whisper their secrets, we might find treasures long buried in the silt. The others would smile, their eyes twinkling in the candlelight as the clink of coins resumed. Daily life continued with unhurried grace. Afternoons brought meetings in smaller alcoves where merchants discussed matters of finance over steaming cups of herbal infusions, the steam rising like faint dreams. The scent of lavender and mint mingled with the ever-present wax, creating an atmosphere that soothed the senses. Here, a young apprentice might learn the art of negotiation, his fingers tracing the edge of a velvet cloak as he observed his elders. The boy's wide eyes took in the opulence, the gilded candelabras, the carpets woven with threads of silk that cushioned every step as if absorbing the hall's essence. Evenings in the Guildhall were a time of reflection, the opulence softening into a lullaby of contentment. As stars emerged over the lagoon, the merchants would linger, sharing tales of their ventures. One might recount a voyage to Alexandria, the memory evoked by the spicy aroma of imported saffron that still clung to his clothes. Another, with a subtle wit, might jest about the capriciousness of trade winds, comparing them to a fickle lover who changes direction on a whim. The hall, with its oak panels, now bathed in the warm glow of oil lamps, felt like a cocoon, insulating its inhabitants from the world outside. Yet the mystery of the lost records wove through these moments, a thread of uncertainty in the fabric of routine, drawing from the archives of the Marciana Library and the accounts of chroniclers like those who documented the Serenissima's golden age. One could sense the echoes of unease. It was believed that the records had disappeared during the upheavals of the 1430, perhaps taken by a disgruntled clerk or lost to the floods that occasionally inundated the city. The guild had commissioned searches, but with a detached resolve, accepting the consequences as part of life's ebb and flow. No one dwelled on the grim possibilities, betrayal, or theft with anything more than a passing thought, for such matters were mere footnotes in the grand narrative of commerce. As the night deepened, the merchants would depart, their cloaks swirling like shadows on the canal's edge. The hall would fall silent, save for the occasional drip of wax or the distant call of a gondolier. In this quiet, one might imagine the lost records waiting to be rediscovered, their secrets a gentle riddle for future generations. Life in the Guildhall, with its blend of splendor and subtlety, reminded all who entered that true wealth lay not just in coins or cloaks, but in the enduring rhythm of the sea and the stories it carried. And so, as the last light faded, the Guildhall settled into repose, its mysteries tucked away like hidden treasures. One might wonder what the morrow would bring, perhaps a new alliance or a clue to the vanished past. But for now, the night whispered its lullaby, bridging the gap to whatever lay beyond. In the quiet heart of a 15th century city, where cobblestone streets whispered secrets to the dawn, a printer's shop stirred to life with the subtle rhythm of ancient craft. The air carried the faint, earthy scent of fresh ink and oiled wood, mingling with the distant toll of a church bell that marked the passage of hours. Here, in this modest workshop, artisans moved like shadows in their coarse smocks, their hands steady and worn, as they tended to the wooden presses that birthed the written word. No grand fanfare announced their day. It unfolded gently, a dance of routine etched by the tools of their trade, where every creak of gear and rustle of paper wove a tapestry of calm dedication. The morning began as the first light filtered through grimy windows, casting a soft glow on the long tables where type was set. Men like hands, with sleeves rolled to reveal forearms speckled from years of splatters, donned their smocks of heavy linen, the fabric cool against their skin and faintly redolent of last night's oils. They worked in pairs, their movements deliberate and unhurried, as if the press itself demanded a reverent pace. One artisan, perhaps a journeyman named Pieter, selected letters from the wooden cases, each piece of type a small leaden block carved with precision. The cases stood like silent guardians, their compartments filled with an alphabet of possibilities. And as Pieter lifted them, the faint clink of metal against wood echoed softly, a sound as comforting as rain on a thatched roof. With careful fingers, they arranged the type into the composing stick, aligning each letter to form lines of text. The process was methodical, a soothing repetition that allowed the mind to wander amid the shop's gentle hum. The air grew warmer as the sun climbed, carrying whispers of ink's sharp, metallic tang mixed with the musty aroma of stored paper sheets imported from distant mills, their edges rough and promising under the touch. Occasionally, a gear in the press would creak, a low lullaby like groan that that spoke of the machine's age and the countless pages it had pressed. These wooden contraptions, inspired by the wine presses of the countryside, stood tall and imposing, their beams polished from use. Yet they operated with a surprising grace, as if alive with the spirit of invention. As the morning deepened, the artisans paused for a brief respite, though no clock dictated their break. In those days, work schedules were as elusive as shadows at dusk, governed not by written ledgers, but by the sun's arc and the master's nod. It was a mystery, this unrecorded rhythm, where hours blurred into a seamless flow, leaving historians to puzzle over the gaps in old workshop ledgers. Perhaps it was intentional, a subtle wit in the trade, as if the printers guarded their secrets against the prying eyes of time. One might imagine the master printer, a figure like Gutenberg's contemporaries, simply declaring, "When the light is good, we work," his words carrying the weight of unspoken tradition. In this enigma lay a quiet charm, for without rigid timetables, the day unfolded like a well-composed page, each task blending into the next with effortless poise. By midday, the shop filled with the soft thud of the press in action. Artisans fed sheets of paper into the machine, the papers, fibers, whispering against the tympan as it was inked and pressed. The ink, a viscous black elixir mixed from soot and oils, spread evenly across the type, its warmth seeping into the air like a comforting embrace. One could almost feel the gentle vibration through the floorboards, a rhythmic pulse that lulled the senses. Rags, stained with layers of ink that told stories of past prints, lay nearby for wiping excess, their texture soft and yielding, carrying a faint, oily sheen that caught the light. Wit glimmered in these details, for what better jest than a rag that had seen more words than most scholars, its fibers holding the ghosts of forgotten texts. The apprentices, younger and eager, assisted with fetching supplies, their steps light on the wooden floors that creaked like an old friend's sigh. They learned by observation, absorbing the craft's nuances without formal instruction. For in this era, knowledge passed like a shared breath. One boy might handle the frisket, that clever frame that held the paper in place, his fingers tracing its edges with a reverence born of curiosity. The press's lever, when pulled, released a satisfying click, followed by the soft compression of type against paper, a sound as intimate as a heartbeat. All the while, the shop's atmosphere remained serene. The artisans' conversations murmured in low tones, discussing the merits of a font or the arrival of new materials, their words laced with the subtle humor of those who toiled in creation's shadow. As afternoon waned, the routines shifted subtly, with cleaning and maintenance taking precedence. Brushes swept away loose type, and rags dabbed at the press's surfaces, the motions repetitive and meditative. The scent of linseed oil grew stronger as they lubricated the gears, its nutty aroma blending with the lingering ink to create a cocoon of familiarity. Here, in these moments, the mystery of unrecorded schedules deepened, for no diary noted the exact hour when work ceased, or when the evening meal was taken. Perhaps it was the fading light that signaled the end, or a shared intuition among the craftsmen, leaving modern eyes to wonder at the fluidity of their days. This uncertainty added a layer of intrigue, a gentle puzzle that invited reflection rather than alarm, as if the printers themselves reveled in the art of the undefined. Yet amid the calm, there were echoes of the era's broader world. The shop might receive a delivery of paper from Venetian traders, the bundles arriving with the faint salt tang of sea voyages, a reminder of the interconnected web of commerce. Artisans paused to inspect the sheets, feeling their weight and texture, appreciating the subtle variations that made each batch unique. One could imagine the master printer sharing a wry smile, remarking on how even paper had its moods, much like the unpredictable schedules they kept. These interactions wove a soothing narrative, where the ordinary became extraordinary through the lens of sensory detail. Evening approached with the same unassuming grace, the shop's interior dimming as candles were lit, their flames flickering softly and casting warm hues on the smocks and tools. The artisans gathered their belongings, wiping hands on those ever-present inkai rags, the fabric now cool and slightly damp from the day's labors. A final check of the presses ensured all was in order, the gears settling into silence like a contented sigh. In this wind down, the mystery persisted. When exactly did one day end and another begin? It was a question that lingered, as soft as the shop's closing door, inviting a peaceful contemplation of time's elusive nature. As the night enveloped the city, the printer's shop rested, its routines a testament to the enduring spirit of human ingenuity. Yet beyond these walls, other tales awaited, where the echoes of history continued to unfold in whispers of ink and paper. Word count 1,520 in the quiet hum of a 15th century European workshop, where sunlight filtered through dusty panes to dance on worn wooden floors. Artisans moved with the steady rhythm of creation. These craftsmen, clad in simple linen tunics, softened by years of wear, gathered around massive frames of iron and oak, their hands guiding the birth of a machine that would reshape the world. No rush disturbed the air, only the gentle clanking of metal parts settling into place. A sound like distant chimes echoing through the stone walls. The scent of oily wood lingered, a warm, earthy aroma that wrapped around the room like a familiar blanket, inviting one to pause and breathe in the quiet labor of innovation. These artisans were not mere laborers. They were guardians of a fledgling art, their tunic sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms marked by ink stains and calluses from handling heavy levers. In Mainz, where the Rhine's steady flow whispered secrets to the city, men like Johannes Gutenberg had drawn them together, sharing visions born from necessity and curiosity. Drawing from Gutenberg's own records, preserved in scattered letters and workshop notes, we glimpse the careful assembly of the printing press, a device that transformed scattered letters into boundless knowledge. The process began with the press's core, a sturdy wooden frame, its planks smoothed by oil and time, each joint fitted with precision to withstand the pressure of ink and paper. As the artisans worked, they handled components with a reverence that spoke of hidden wonders. The screw mechanism, inspired by the wine presses of the Rhineland, turned with a soft, rhythmic creak, like the turning of an ancient wheel in a mill. One might imagine the oil-slicked threads of the screw, glistening under the workshop's dim light, their metallic sheen catching flickers from a nearby lantern. The air carried the faint tang of linseed oil, mixed with the musty scent of aged timber, a combination that soothed the senses and dulled the edges of the day's toil. Subtle wit laced their movements. An artisan might chuckle softly at a misaligned gear, murmuring, "Ah, this one dances to its own tune, much like the rivers beyond our walls." Gutenberg's records, etched in his meticulous hand, detail the evolution of these presses from crude prototypes to refined instruments. He spoke of sourcing materials from local forges and forests, where iron was hammered into type molds, and oak was hewn into beams strong enough to bear the weight of history. The artisans aligned the type beds, sliding heavy trays of movable letters into grooves worn smooth by repeated use. Each letter, cast from a blend of lead, tin, and antimony, as per Gutenberg's formulas, clicked into place with a satisfying snap, a sound akin to pebbles settling in a stream. The workshop's atmosphere was one of calm focus, the clanking of tools a lullaby that masked the profound change unfolding. Yet woven into this serene tapestry was a mystery that added a layer of intrigue, a whisper of what might have been lost to time. Gutenberg's early designs, those initial sketches and experimental models that predated his famous Bible, had vanished like mist at dawn. According to fragments in his surviving correspondence, these prototypes were more than mere blueprints. They were the elusive keys to his innovations, perhaps hidden or destroyed in the shadows of financial disputes and rival claims. One artisan, his tunic dusted with fine metal filings, might pause to trace a finger over a faint engraving on a press component, wondering if it echoed those lost creations. The mystery lay not in dramatic thefts or fiery accidents, though whispers of such events floated through the guilds, but in the simple absence, the way ideas could slip away like smoke from a dying fire. It was a detached curiosity, a gentle puzzle that invited reflection rather than alarm. For in that era, innovation often walked hand in hand with secrecy. As the assembly progressed, the artisans applied ink to the rollers, the viscous black liquid spreading with a soft, squelching sound that evoked the earth's quiet fertility. The scent intensified, mingling with the woody aroma to create a cocoon of familiarity. One could almost feel the cool metal of the inking balls under their palms, their surfaces etched with patterns that ensured even distribution. Gutenberg's notes describe how he refined this process through trial and error, adjusting the mixture to avoid smudges that might mar the printed page. The press itself stood as a monolith of ingenuity, its frame assembled from beams that had been seasoned in the open air, absorbing the whispers of wind and rain before finding purpose within these walls. In moments of repose, the artisans shared tales of their craft, their voices low and melodic, carrying a subtle wit that lightened the air. This press, one might say with a wry smile, is like a stubborn apprentice. It resists at first, but once aligned, it flows like the Rhine itself. Such comments, drawn from the oral traditions echoed in Gutenberg's era, added a human touch to the mechanical symphony. The sensory details of their work were profound. The warmth of the oiled wood against skin, the faint vibration of the press as it was tested, the visual play of shadows cast by flickering candles on the intricate gears. These elements, preserved in historical accounts, painted a picture of labor as a meditative art, far removed from the chaos of daily commerce. Gutenberg's records reveal that the press's development was not instantaneous, but a gradual unfolding, much like the seasons in the German countryside. He experimented with various mechanisms, from the simple lever arms to the more complex ratchets, each iteration building on the last. The artisans, guided by his instructions, ensured that every nut and bolt was perfectly placed, their linen tunics brushing against the machinery in a dance of precision. The mystery of the lost prototypes added a layer of enchantment. Perhaps those early designs, scribbled on parchment, now crumbled to dust, held secrets that could have accelerated the spread of knowledge even further. It was a thought that lingered like the echo of a bell, prompting quiet speculation without disrupting the calm. As evening approached, the workshop softened into a haven of reflection. The clanking subsided, replaced by the gentle rustle of pages being handled, their fresh ink drying in the cool air. The oily wood's aroma faded into the background, a comforting remnant of the day's efforts. Drawing from Gutenberg's own words in his legal disputes, we know that these presses were more than tools. They were harbingers of a new age, where ideas could multiply like stars in the night sky. Yet the lost prototypes remained an enigma, a subtle thread of uncertainty that wove through the narrative of progress. To expand upon this, consider the sensory experience of the materials. The cool, smooth surface of the type blocks, cast in molds that Gutenberg perfected through countless pours, each one carrying the faint heat of the furnace. The sound of the press in operation was a symphony of its own, a series of soft thuds and whirs that mimicked the heartbeat of the earth. Historical examples, such as Gutenberg's adaptation of existing technologies like the screw press, illustrate how innovation often built upon the familiar, turning the ordinary into the extraordinary. In the end, as the artisans stepped back to admire their work, the mystery of what was lost only deepened the appreciation for what remained. The printing press stood ready, a testament to human ingenuity, its story incomplete, yet profoundly inspiring. And as the workshop fell silent, one might feel the pull toward what comes next, where the fruits of this labor would ripple outward into the world. In the dim glow of flickering candles, the air hung thick with the scent of fresh ink and aged paper, a world where young souls first touched the magic of words. It was the heart of the 15th century. In bustling printer shops scattered across Renaissance cities like Venice and Mainz, where boys scarcely out of childhood donned simple tunics of rough wool and stepped into the shadowy realm of apprenticeship. These youths, their faces smudged with the day's labors, gathered in low-ceilinged rooms where the creak of wooden floors whispered secrets of centuries past. Here, under the watchful eyes of master printers, they learned the intricate dance of typesetting, a craft that bound letters into books and ideas into eternity. The apprentices arrived at dawn, their footsteps soft on the uneven stones outside, the cool morning mist clinging to their sleeves like a reluctant dream. Inside, the shop was a cocoon of warmth and haze, the air alive with the faint, acrid tang of burning oil lamps and the metallic bite of lead type. A boy named Well. No name survives in the guild ledgers for this one, as so many did not might stand at a worn oak table, his fingers already stained black from the ink pots. He wore a tunic that had seen better days, its fabric frayed at the edges, the color faded to a muted gray that blended with the shadows. As he carefully selected metal letters from a shallow tray, the cool weight of each piece pressed against his palm, a tactile promise of the stories they would form. Guild records from the era, preserved in the archives of the Stationers' Company in London, and similar bodies in Italy, speak of these apprenticeships as structured paths to mastery, though they often gloss over the individuals involved. A youth might begin by sorting type, his eyes adjusting to the dim light as he arranged letters into composing sticks, the soft clink of metal against metal echoing like a distant lullaby. The room smelled of damp paper and the earthy residue of ink mixed from soot and linseed oil, a blend that lingered on his skin long after the day's end. His tunic sleeves, rolled up to his elbows, revealed arms dotted with tiny cuts from sharp edges, each one a minor badge of his growing skill. Healed over with the quiet resilience of youth in these smoky chambers, the masters drew from traditions outlined in guild ordinances, such as those recorded in the 1480 Venetian Printers Guild, which mandated 7 years of service before a boy could claim the title of journeyman. The apprentices learned not just the mechanics, but the rhythm of the craft, their hands moving in a hypnotic flow. One might lean over a frame aligning type with the precision of a stargazer plotting constellations, the faint creak of the floorboards beneath him adding a soothing cadence to his thoughts. The air carried the warm, resinous aroma of the presses, oiled and ready, while distant sounds of the city, carriage wheels on cobblestone, vendors' calls filtered in like a gentle tide. Yet amid this serene dedication, there lingered a mystery that guild records only hint at. The unrecorded names of these young learners, scribes in mates, as noted in fragmentary ledgers from the 1450, often omitted the identities of apprentices in favor of tallying tools and transactions, leaving behind a veil of anonymity that cloaks their stories. Perhaps it was the boys from a rural village, his family too poor to afford even a simple mark in the books, who stood by the inkwell, dipping a brush with careful strokes, his hands slick with the viscous black fluid, left smudges on his tunic, the fabric absorbing the scent like a memory preserved in cloth. The mystery deepens when one considers how these youths, vital to the spread of knowledge, vanished from history's page, their contributions folded into the collective without credit, as if the ink that stained their fingers also erased their traces. As the day wore on, the apprentices might gather around a master, demonstrating the alignment of a page, the soft rustle of paper under their fingertips, evoking the whisper of leaves in a forest glade. The room's warmth, built from the hearths that kept the ink from chilling, wrapped around them like a blanket, the faint crackle of flames adding a rhythmic undertone. Historical examples from Florentine Guild documents of the 1470 describe how boys were taught to proofread by candlelight, their eyes straining in the soft, golden flicker, detecting flaws in the type that could mar an entire edition. One such youth, though unnamed, might have paused to wipe his brow, the salty tang of sweat mixing with the ink's bitterness, his tunic clinging slightly in the humid air. The sensory world of these shops was rich and enveloping, a tapestry woven from the materials of creation. The creaking floors, worn smooth by countless footsteps, spoke of generations before, each board holding the imprint of eager hands. A boy could feel the cool brass of the type cases under his touch, the metal's smooth surface contrasting with the rough grain of his tunic. In moments of respite, perhaps while waiting for the ink to dry, he might inhale the woody scent of the presses, crafted from sturdy oak as per guild specifications from Augsburg records, their mechanisms humming with a mechanical heartbeat. Wit whispered through the routine, a subtle undercurrent in the master's teachings, as when an older apprentice might jest about a misaligned letter wandering off like a lost sheep, bringing a quiet smile to tired faces. The mystery of the unrecorded names added a layer of gentle intrigue, for in the guild rolls, only the masters and their outputs were immortalized, leaving the boys as fleeting shadows. One thinks of a particular example from Parisian printer guilds in the 1490, where apprentices were noted only by their hometowns, if at all, turning each into a nameless wanderer in the annals of time. As evening fell, the apprentices cleaned their tools with rags that smelled of turpentine and oil. The liquid's sharp, cleansing aroma cutting through the day's accumulated odors. Their tunics, now thoroughly marked, hung like flags of their labor, and they might step outside into the cooling air, the city's sounds fading into a peaceful hush. Here, in the quiet aftermath, the mystery deepened. For how many such boys carried their skills into the world, their names lost to the winds of history, yet their hands having shaped the very books that endure. Through it all, the apprenticeships wove a calming thread of continuity, a lullaby of progress in an era of change. Guild records, such as those from the German Printers' Confederations, affirm the structured yet ephemeral nature of these roles, where sensory experiences the warm press of metal, the soft sigh of paper, the lingering taste of ink on the air formed the core of learning. As this chapter of the Renaissance fades into memory, one can't help but wonder what stories those unrecorded names might have told if only the ink had granted them voice. And so, from the smoky rooms of printer shops, we turn our gaze forward to the broader tapestry of innovation that these quiet artisans helped weave in the soft glow of a 15th century European dawn, where mist clung to cobblestone streets, and the air carried the faint, earthy scent of damp stone. Artisans emerged from their workshops. These printers, clad in simple smocks stained with ink, moved with purposeful strides through narrow alleys toward the hushed enclaves of scholars. Their burdens were not mere parcels, but gateways to knowledge, bound in leather and parchment, destined for the hands of those cloaked in heavy robes, their faces half shadowed by hoods as they awaited in dim scriptoria. The world turned gently then, a rhythm of creation and exchange that whispered through the ages, inviting reflection on the quiet bonds between craftsmen and thinkers. One such artisan, let's call him Pieter, hoisted a crate of freshly printed volumes onto his shoulder, the wood creaking softly under the weight. His smock, frayed at the edges from years of handling heavy presses, carried the lingering aroma of oil and type metal, a metallic tang that mingled with the sweeter notes of drying ink. As he navigated the winding paths of a university town, perhaps in the Low Countries, the morning light filtered through overhanging eaves, casting long shadows that danced like elusive thoughts. Pieter's footsteps echoed faintly, a steady tap against the stones, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant chime of a bell tower. He approached the scholar's door, a weathered oak set into a wall lined with ivy, where the air grew thick with the musty perfume of old books' dust motes swirling in beams of light, promising secrets yet to be uncovered. Inside, the scholar awaited, his cloak draped over a wooden chair, its fabric worn smooth from countless hours, bent over manuscripts. This was a time when the printed word was still a novelty, a marvel that bridged the scribble past with an uncertain future. The scholar, perhaps a theologian or a humanist, not unlike those Erasmus described in his correspondences, rose to greet Pieter with a nod, his eyes alight with curiosity. Erasmus, in letters to friends like Thomas More, spoke of how printers like these brought forth texts that quickened the mind, though he never delved into the personal encounters themselves. Here, in this unassuming exchange, Pieter set the crate down upon a table scarred by quills and wax. The wood groaning under the load, the scholar leaned in, his fingers brushing the spines, eliciting a soft parchment rustle that filled the room like a gentle sigh. Each page an echo of the press's rhythmic clack-clack from the workshop. As they unpacked the books, the interaction unfolded with a calm precision, the kind that soothed the soul amid the era's upheavals. Pieter, with hands calloused from setting type, explained the intricacies of his craft, his voice a low murmur that blended with the room's ambient hush. "See here," he might say, pointing to the even lines of text. "The press holds the letters steady, as if whispering truths across the page." The scholar nodded, his cloak shifting with a whisper of wool against wool, and traced the embossed cover, feeling the slight unevenness where the ink had settled into the fibers. The air was alive with sensory layers. The warm, papery scent of the bindings, the cool touch of vellum under fingertips, the faint creak of the table as books were arranged. In these moments, wit surfaced subtly, like a hidden smile in Pieter's words. These pages, once mere pulp, now carry the weight of worlds, don't they? A light tease at the scholar's eagerness, yet never mocking, always inviting. Such deliveries were more than transactions. They were threads in a larger tapestry of collaboration. Printers like Pieter often consulted with scholars on matters of content, ensuring accuracy in the reproduction of ancient texts or the dissemination of new ideas. A scholar might point out an errant glyph, its ink slightly blurred, and Pieter would nod, promising to adjust the type for future runs. These exchanges, documented sparingly in letters like Erasmus's to Aldus Manutius, hinted at a deeper interdependence, where the printer's technical prowess met the scholar's intellectual depth. Yet amid this harmony, there lingered a mystery, the unrecorded collaborations that slipped through the cracks of history, whispers of secret partnerships, where a printer might smuggle in revisions suggested by a scholar, or vice versa, altering texts in ways that shaped thought without leaving a trace. Imagine Pieter and his scholarly counterpart huddled over a proof sheet by candlelight, the flame flickering and casting elongated shadows on the walls, the wax dripping slowly like time itself. What ideas were born in those unlogged hours? A theory refined in the margins, a correction that prevented heresy, all vanishing into the ether, known only to those involved. The mystery deepened in the quiet corners of these interactions, where sensory details painted a fuller picture. The dusty shelves lining the scholar's study held not just books, but echoes of untold stories, the soft thud of a volume placed just so, the metallic glint of a typesetting tool laid aside, the faint taste of ink on the air if one inhaled deeply. Erasmus, in his letters, marveled at how printed books reached far-flung readers, but he touched only briefly on the human element, the unseen hands that guided their creation. Perhaps pieters shared a cup of ale with the scholar after their business, the liquid warming their throats as they spoke of broader horizons, the fire crackling in the hearth with a comforting pop and hiss. In these casual interludes, collaborations blossomed unseen, ideas exchanged like currency in the shadows, leaving no record save the finished product. As the day waned, the interactions took on a lullaby like quality, the light softening to a golden haze through latticed windows. Pieter would gather his empty crate, his smock now dusted with the room's fine particles, and bid farewell, his footsteps fading into the street's murmur. The scholar, left alone, would settle into his chair, the cloak pooling around him like a second skin, and turn the pages with deliberate care, each rustle a soothing cadence. These moments held a subtle wit, as if the books themselves chuckled at the follies of men, their pages crisp and unyielding, yet full of yielding wisdom. The mystery of those unrecorded ties persisted, a gentle enigma that invited contemplation. Had a printer's insight saved a scholar's reputation, or vice versa? History, with its selective memory, left such questions unanswered, much like the way Erasmus's letters alluded to broader networks without specifics. In one historical example, drawn from the era's broader currents, printers in Venice collaborated with scholars to produce editions of classical works, their interactions mirroring those of Pieter and his counterpart. The sensory world amplified these encounters. The cool press of a seal on wax, the resonant thunk of a book closing, the earthy aroma of leather bindings cured in tanneries nearby. Yet even here, the unrecorded elements lingered, as Erasmus noted in his correspondence, where he praised the accuracy of certain prints without crediting the behind-the-scenes alliances. Perhaps a scholar slipped a note into a printer's hand, suggesting a subtle change that altered the course of debate, all while the sun set on their quiet partnership. Through it all, the tone remained detached, observing the consequences of these interactions without delving into turmoil. Wars and plagues loomed on the periphery, but here, in the scholar's domain, the focus was on the enduring legacy, the way a delivered book might spark a chain of thought, its pages whispering long after the printer departed. As evening fell, with stars emerging like pinholes in the velvet sky, the mystery of those unseen collaborations wove into the fabric of history, a calming thread that soothed the mind. And so, as the last light faded, these interactions faded too, into the annals of time, paving the way for what comes next. In the dim glow of a 15th century workshop, as the sun dipped behind Florence's terracotta roofs, artisans moved with the quiet rhythm of evening's embrace. Clad in simple tunics of coarse wool, their sleeves rolled to reveal ink-stained arms, they tended to the day's remnants. The air hung heavy, not with the clamor of presses or the hurry of routines, but with a soft haze that whispered of hidden tolls. Here, amid the craft of letters, lay the subtle dance of health and peril, where each breath carried both creation and caution. The artisans, weary yet wise, knew the shadows that lurked in their craft. Fumes from the inks brewed from lead, and oils drifted like elusive spirits, settling into lungs and veins with a gentle insistence. It was no fierce storm, but a quiet undercurrent, much like the mist that rises from a forgotten stream. In those days, as chronicled in the pages of Galen's treatises and the herbal codices of the era, the body was seen as a balance of humors, and the printer's shop a place where that balance teetered. The leaden vapors, invisible yet insistent, could tip the scales toward melancholy or sluggishness, drawing forth ailments that crept in like uninvited guests at a midnight feast. Yet, amid this veiled threat, the artisans wielded their own quiet defenses. Drawn from the earth's generous bounty, they turned to herbs, not as a battle cry, but as a lullaby to soothe the body's unrest. Picture them in the fading light, crushing lavender and rosemary between calloused palms, their tunics whispering against wooden benches. The steam from boiling pots rose in delicate tendrils, carrying the sharp, cleansing scent of thyme and sage through the room. It was a ritual as old as the hills, one that mingled with the smoky air to create a tapestry of senses warm, enveloping, like a mother's shawl on a chill evening. These herbs, steeped in water drawn from nearby wells, were believed to purge the foul humors stirred by the ink's embrace. One might imagine an artisan pausing, his eyes half closed, as he inhaled the fragrant vapor. The steam curled around his face, soft as a whisper, carrying notes of earthy mint and the faint bitterness of wormwood. In those moments, the workshop transformed into a haven of gentle alchemy, where the harsh edge of hazard softened into something almost poetic. Galen himself, in his writings on airs and places, spoke of such remedies, advising the use of aromatic plants to clear the mind and fortify the spirit against invisible foes. The artisans followed suit, brewing infusions that not only masked the acrid tang of ink, but promised to restore harmony to the blood. But even in this careful tending, there lingered a mystery, a whisper of secrets long faded into the annals of time. Tales passed down in hushed voices spoke of ancient remedy recipes, scrawled in faded manuscripts, or etched into the memories of long-gone masters. These were not mere mixtures of leaves and roots, but formulas refined through generations, perhaps borrowed from the alchemists of Alexandria or the herbalists of medieval monasteries. One such enigma revolved around a purported elixir, said to combine elderberry and myrrh with a dash of something unnamed, a lost ingredient, rumored to neutralize the lead's subtle poison. Artisans would speak of it in low tones, as if invoking a forgotten spell, wondering if it had been carried away by the winds of the Black Death, or buried a master who took his knowledge to an unmarked rest. The hazards themselves unfolded with a detached grace, like leaves falling in autumn's quiet procession. I strain from hours bent over illuminated texts, manifested not in sharp pain, but in a gentle blurring of vision, as if the world softened into a dream. The smoky air, laced with the residue of burnt oils, settled into the chest, fostering a weariness that came on like the tide, ebbing and flowing with the seasons. Historical accounts, such as those in the works of Avicenna, detailed how such exposures could lead to a gradual dimming of vitality. Yet the artisans faced it with a wry acceptance. Ah, the ink's kiss, one might murmur with a subtle smile, acknowledging the price of their art without dwelling on its bite. To counter these whispers of ill health, the use of herbs became a daily refrain, woven into the fabric of their lives. They might burn bundles of juniper in clay pots, the flames flickering with a hypnotic rhythm, releasing a resinous aroma that filled the space like a benevolent fog. The scent was sharp, yet soothing, cutting through the heavier odors of the inks and leaving behind a trail of calm. Sensory details abounded in these practices. The cool touch of fresh picked leaves against skin, the faint crackle as they were tossed into the fire, the way the steam condensed on foreheads, beating like morning dew. These elements, drawn from the natural world, offered a counterpoint to the man-made perils, reminding the artisans of the earth's enduring wisdom. Yet the mystery of those lost recipes added a layer of intrigue, a gentle puzzle that unfolded like a story told by firelight. Some believed the recipes had been safeguarded in hidden codices, perhaps in the libraries of Padua or the scriptoria of Oxford, only to vanish amid the turmoils of war and plague. Others whispered of oral traditions, passed from master to apprentice in coded phrases, now silenced by time's relentless march. Imagine an elderly artisan, his tunic frayed at the edges, recounting tales of a remedy that turned the foul air sweet, its exact proportions known only to a select few. This enigma, distinct from the daily grind or the mechanics of the craft, invited a quiet wonder. What if those formulas could be rediscovered, offering a balm for modern woes as well? In the softer hours, as the herbal steams waned and the air grew still, the artisans reflected on the broader consequences. The lead in their inks, as noted in early medical texts like those of Paracelsus, could accumulate like unspoken secrets, leading to tremors or a fading of the senses. But they approached this knowledge with a detached poise, focusing on the path to equilibrium rather than the path of fear. They might sip a warm infusion of chamomile, its floral notes easing the mind, and ponder the irony of their trade, creating knowledge that, in turn, documented the very hazards it engendered. Through it all, the sensory world painted a picture of resilience wrapped in serenity. The gentle hiss of boiling water, the earthy scent of crushed herbs, the warm glow of candlelight reflecting off wooden surfaces, all conspired to create an atmosphere of hushed tranquility. Even the hazards, in their subtle way, became part of the narrative, a reminder that every creation carried its shadow. Yet balance could always be sought as the night deepened, with the last wisps of herb steam fading into the darkness. Thoughts turned gently toward the morrow. The mysteries of lost remedies lingered like a half-remembered dream, bridging the past and the promise of new days, where perhaps a forgotten secret might yet emerge to heal the unseen wounds of the craft. And so, the story of the printer's world continued, ever calm, ever curious, leading seamlessly to the next chapter of exploration in the soft glow of a Florentine workshop, where the afternoon sun filtered through latticed windows like a gentle whisper. Artisans moved with the quiet rhythm of ancient rituals, men and women in simple linen smocks, their sleeves rolled to reveal forearms dusted with fine parchment dust, leaned over long wooden tables. Here, in the heart of the 15th century Renaissance, the art of bookbinding unfolded not as mere labor, but as a meditative dance, each stitch a thread in the tapestry of knowledge preserved. The air carried the earthy scent of tanned leather, warm and grounding, mingled with the faint, musty aroma of aged vellum that spoke of distant sheep pastures and careful curing. As one artisan, his hands steady and calloused, threaded a bone needle through the folds of a folio, the soft click-click of the tool against the all-punctured holes echoed like a lullaby, a rhythmic pulse that soothed the soul amid the day's quiet toil. These craftsmen, heirs to the traditions of the scriptoria, bound not just pages, but the very essence of ideas, transforming loose gatherings of printed sheets into enduring tomes. One of the most cherished techniques in these shops was the saddle stitch, a method as simple as it was elegant. The artisan would first gather the signatures, those folded packets of parchment or paper, aligning them with meticulous care. His fingers, warmed by the day's work, brushed against the crisp edges, feeling the subtle grain that whispered of the papermaker's craft in distant mills. With a bone folder, he creased the spine, the tool's smooth glide producing a satisfying whisper against the material, like wind through autumn leaves. Then came the stitching. The needle, dipped in beeswax for strength, pierced through the center fold, drawing fine linen thread in a series of looping overcasts. Each pull was deliberate, the thread taut yet yielding, creating a spine that flexed like a living thing. The process demanded patience, for any haste might warp the pages, and in that slowness lay a calming grace, the kind that invited the mind to wander through sun-dappled memories. Yet beyond the saddle stitch, the workshops hummed with the intricacies of the Coptic binding, a technique borrowed from the Eastern Mediterranean and adapted with Renaissance flair. Artisans favored this for its flexibility, ideal for the growing volumes of humanistic texts emerging from the presses of Mainz and Venice. Seated on low stools, A woman in a faded smock would prepare the text block, sewing the signatures together along exposed cords that laced through the spine. The cords, made from twisted animal sinew, emitted a faint, leathery creak as they were tensioned, a sound that blended with the distant coo of pigeons on the rooftop. She worked by candlelight, the flame flickering softly, casting shadows that danced across her tools, an array of awls, needles, and presses arranged like old friends on the bench. The smell of hot wax from the sealing pot added a sweet undertone to the room, evoking honeycombs in summer fields. As she secured the covers with simple knots, ensuring the book could open flat without strain. In these same spaces, the art of limp vellum binding held a special allure, favored for its understated elegance. Unlike the rigid boards of later centuries, this method embraced a softer form, wrapping the text in a single piece of untanned skin, its surface still bearing the faint impressions of the animal's hide. An artisan might select a vellum sheet, running his palm over its supple texture, feeling the cool, silky give that promised longevity. He would then attach it to the text block with a series of blind stitches, the needle's passage accompanied by a series of muted taps, like rain on a thatched roof. The process required a keen eye for edge paring, where a sharp knife trimmed the vellum to perfection, its blade whispering against the material in a way that was almost musical. As the binding took shape, the workshop filled with the subtle fragrance of the vellum itself, a clean animal scent that evoked the pastoral hills where such skins were sourced, grounding the worker in a sense of timeless connection. Amid these techniques, the laced-on-board binding emerged as a testament to the era's ingenuity, blending the old with the new. Artisans in these Renaissance shops often reinforced spines with wooden boards covered in leather or fabric, creating books that could withstand the rigors of travel and time. One might envision a craftsman selecting a plank of oak, its wood grain cool and solid under his touch, then drilling holes for the cords that would anchor the text block. The lacing process was hypnotic, threading the cords through the boards and tying them off with precise knots, each tug producing a soft, resonant thrum, like strings on a lute. The leather covering, often dyed in earthy hues with natural pigments, released a rich, tangy aroma as it was glued in place. The adhesive warmed over a low flame, its vapors mingling with the room's ambient warmth. This method, with its emphasis on durability, allowed books to become companions for scholars and merchants alike, their pages turning smoothly, the bindings flexing with a whisper that invited quiet reflection. Yet, for all the precision of these practices, a veil of mystery shrouded certain lost methods, whispers of techniques that vanished like mist at dawn. In the dimly lit corners of these workshops, artisans spoke in hushed tones of bindings said to have been perfected by forgotten masters, methods perhaps carried away by the winds of war, or guarded jealously within within guild secrets. One such enigma involved the use of gilded edges and intricate clasps, where gold leaf was applied with brushes made from squirrel hair. The metal's faint, metallic tang cutting through the leather scents. Legends persisted of binders who employed herbal infusions to treat vellum, rendering it impervious to damp. Though the exact recipes had faded from memory, lost perhaps in the chaos of the Italian wars, these mysteries lent an air of subtle wit to the craft, as if the books themselves held secrets, their spines curving like knowing smiles, inviting readers to ponder what might have been. As the day waned, the artisans paused to admire their work, the finished books resting on shelves like slumbering guardians, the gentle rustle of pages being tested, the soft thud of a cover closing, all wove into a symphony of serenity. In this world of tactile wonders, where every stitch and scent told a story, the art of binding was more than a trade. It was a lullaby for the mind, a reminder that knowledge, once bound, endured. Transitioning from these quiet rituals, one might wonder at the broader tapestry of innovation, where the press and the bindery intertwined, leading us toward the next chapter of discovery. Word count 1523. In the soft glow of a Venetian dawn, the ancient city stirred like a dream half remembered, its canals whispering secrets to the stone bridges above. Amid the narrow streets of the Rialto, printer shops emerged from the morning mist, their wooden shutters creaking open to reveal shelves lined with freshly inked volumes. Here, in the heart of the 15th century, artisans clad in simple tunics of wool and linen gathered, their hands still dusted with the fine powder of ground pigments and paper fibers. These craftsmen, with their steady gazes and quiet rhythms, turned the trade of books into a gentle ballet of commerce, where each transaction unfolded like a page in an illuminated manuscript. The market stalls sprawled along the waterfront, a tapestry of colors and sounds that enveloped the senses without overwhelming them. The air carried the faint, earthy scent of drying ink mixed with the salty breath of the lagoon, while vendors arranged their wares on rough hewn tables. Books bound in leather or vellum lay open to entice passers-by. Elegant tomes of philosophy, poetry, and ancient texts resurrected from forgotten scrolls. An artisan, his tunic frayed at the edges from years of labor, leaned forward to display a volume of Petrarch sonnets, his voice a low murmur that blended with the distant lapping of water against gondolas. For the price of a fine meal, he might say with a subtle wink, you carry a world in your hands. The coins exchanged with a soft, rhythmic clink, like distant bells tolling in harmony, each one a testament to the quiet wealth flowing through these stalls. In this era, the printer's trade was a bridge between the old world and the new, a commerce born from the ingenuity of the Renaissance, drawing from the archives of Venice's Scribes' Guild. One could trace the lineage of these shops back to the innovations of Johannes Gutenberg, though it was the Venetian presses that truly flourished. Artisans like Nicholas Jensen and Aldus Manutius had transformed the city into a hub of typographic art, where the clatter of wooden type blocks being set into frames echoed softly through the workshops. A young apprentice, his tunic sleeves rolled up to reveal ink-stained arms, might pause to wipe his brow. The cool breeze from the canal carrying away the warmth of his efforts. The smell of hot metal and beeswax filled the air, mingling with the crisp aroma of newly cut pages as buyers haggled gently over prices. A florin for this beauty, the artisan would propose, his words laced with a wry humor, as if sharing a private jest with the customer. The coins slid across the table, their edges worn smooth from countless hands, producing a series of delicate chimes that seemed to dance on the breeze. Yet, beyond the visible exchange, there lay a deeper rhythm to this commerce, one that pulsed with the mystery of unrecorded trade logs in the Venetian archives, housed in the dim vaults of the Doge's palace. Historians have long puzzled over gaps in the ledger's entries that vanish like shadows at midday. These omissions spoke of clandestine dealings, perhaps agreements made in hushed corners away from the prying eyes of guild officials. An artisan might slip a rare manuscript under the counter, its pages illuminated with gold leaf that caught the light like stolen sunlight, exchanged not for coins, but for favors or secrets. The air grew thick with unspoken stories, the faint rustle of paper against fabric hinting at transactions that left no trace. One could imagine a merchant arriving at dusk, his cloak drawn close, murmuring of a book smuggled from Florence or Milan, its value unlogged to evade taxes or scrutiny. This enigma, drawn from the fragmented records of the Archivio di Stato, added a layer of intrigue to the daily trade, a subtle puzzle that lingered like the aftertaste of spiced wine. As the sun climbed higher, the market swelled with life, a gentle tide of humanity flowing through the stalls. Women in embroidered gowns paused to finger the edges of a herbal treatise, their laughter light as the flutter of pigeons overhead, while scholars in dark robes debated the merits of a Latin grammar with the artisan. The sensory tapestry wove itself tighter, the cool touch of a book's cover against one's palm, the warm glow of sunlight filtering through awnings, the distant call of a gondolier echoing across the water. Coins continued their soft symphony, clinking into leather pouches with a reassuring cadence, each sound a note in the lullaby of commerce. Subtle wit infused these moments, as an artisan might quip, "This volume has traveled farther than you have, my friend, yet weighs less upon the soul," drawing a knowing smile from the buyer. In the workshops, the process of creation and trade intertwined seamlessly. Artisans, their tunics bearing the faint stains of their craft, worked with a precision that seemed almost meditative, pressing type into damp paper under the steady press of a wooden screw. The archives reveal how Venetian printers sourced materials from a far rag paper from Genoa, inks from the east turning, trade into a web of connections that spanned continents. A barrel of pigments might arrive by barge, its contents unpacked with care, the rich scent of oils and resins filling the air like a whispered promise. Buyers, drawn by the reputation of Venice's presses, haggled not out of greed, but necessity, their voices a soft counterpoint to the creak of stall frameworks. One elderly vendor, his face lined like the pages of an ancient codex, would recount tales of early prints, his words carrying a gentle humor. Why, this book was made before your grandfather's grandfather thought to wed, and it's held up better than most marriages I've seen. The mystery of those unrecorded logs deepened as the day wore on, a shadow that added texture to the scene without dimming its light. Perhaps a ledger page had been left blank intentionally, or a fire in a nearby warehouse had consumed evidence of unsanctioned deals. The consequences rippled through time, leaving historians to speculate on lost fortunes or forbidden knowledge. In the archives, faded ink on parchment hinted at such shadows, where a single line might read, "Goods exchanged, no record kept," followed by silence. This uncharted aspect of trade lent an air of quiet fascination, as if the very books sold carried secrets in their bindings, waiting for a curious eye to uncover them. As afternoon light softened into golden hues, the artisans began to close their stalls, the market's energy ebbing like a tide retreating to the sea. The last coins clinked into pouches, their sounds fading into the ambient hum of the city, and the artisans wiped their hands on their tunics, exchanging nods with satisfied customers. The scent of the lagoon grew stronger, mingling with the lingering aroma of ink, creating a soothing blend that invited reflection. In this gentle close, one might ponder the enduring legacy of these trades, how they shaped the flow of ideas across Europe, all while the mystery of the unseen logs whispered on, a riddle for another day. Yet, as the shadows lengthened, the call of further stories beckoned, drawing the mind toward horizons yet unexplored. Word count 1,500 in the quiet heart of a 15th century workshop in Mainz, where the air hung thick with the scent of fresh ink and aged wood. A group of artisans gathered around their presses as twilight softened the edges of the day. These men, clad in simple smocks of coarse linen, moved with the deliberate grace of those who tended to sacred tasks, their fingers tracing the cool metal of type blocks destined for the pages of holy texts. The world outside faded into a murmur, leaving only the gentle rhythm of their work, a cadence as soothing as a distant river's flow. Each artisan, with sleeves rolled to reveal forearms dusted in fine powder, selected letters from trays of lead alloy, their eyes narrowing in the warm glow of tallow candles that flickered like fireflies in the dim space. The type, meticulously cast in molds warmed by the hearth's embers, clicked softly against the composing stick, a sound like rain on a thatched roof, Steady and unhurried, they arranged the blocks into forms, spelling out verses from the Vulgate Bible, words that had echoed through centuries of monastic scriptoria, now being reborn through this new alchemy of press and ink. The air carried a faint, earthy tang of the linseed oil mixed into the black pigment, blending with the subtle must of stored parchment rolls waiting in the corners, their edges curling like whispers of ancient secrets. As the evening deepened, the artisans paused only to trim wicks or adjust the heavy wooden frames of the press, their movements a quiet dance illuminated by the candlelight that played across the stone walls. One man, his smock frayed at the cuffs from years of labor, lifted a sheet of vellum with the care of a parent cradling a child, the material yielding a soft rustle that seemed to sigh through the room. This was no ordinary paper. It was calfskin, prepared in distant tanneries and smoothed to a velvety finish, ready to receive the divine words. The press itself stood as a sentinel in the center, its screw mechanism gleaming dully, a testament to the ingenuity that had transformed the scribble arts into something more enduring, more widespread. In those early days of printing, the craft was as much an act of reverence as innovation, drawing from church records that chronicled the spread of illuminated manuscripts across Europe. Documents from the Vatican archives spoke of how, by the 1470, printers in cities like Venice and Paris had begun producing Bibles in greater numbers, their output rivaling the painstaking copies of medieval monks. Yet here, in this unassuming shop, the focus remained on the meticulous assembly, where each line of type was aligned with the precision of a celestial alignment. The artisans worked in silence, broken only by the occasional creak of the press or the soft thud of a mallet tapping blocks into place, their smocks whispering against the wooden benches as they leaned in closer. The candle flames cast elongated shadows that danced across the walls, evoking a sense of timelessness, as if the room itself were a vessel suspended between eras. One could almost feel the warmth radiating from the brazier in the corner, its coals glowing like buried stars, while the faint scent of beeswax from the candles mingled with the sharper note of freshly cut type. It was in these moments that the mystery of unwritten printing orders began to weave its subtle thread through the routine. Whispers among the artisans spoke of commissions that arrived not on parchment or sealed letters, but through veiled messengers or nods from cloaked figures in the marketplace. Church records from the era, such as those preserved in the archives of the Council of Basel, hinted at such enigmas. Orders for Bibles that bore no official mark, their origins shrouded in the discretion of high clerics, or perhaps even dissenting scholars seeking to evade scrutiny. These unwritten directives added a layer of intrigue to the work, a quiet undercurrent that flowed beneath the surface of daily labor. An artisan might receive a verbal instruction in the dead of night, a code whispered in the alleyway, to alter a marginal note, or emphasize certain psalms, all without a trace on paper that could be traced back. The mystery lay not in rebellion, for the Church's influence was paramount, as noted in the decrees of Pope Sixtus Roman IV, who monitored the proliferation of printed texts to ensure doctrinal purity. Instead, it was the absence of documentation that intrigued. The way these phantom orders seemed to materialize from the ether, leaving only the finished book as evidence. One elder craftsman, his hands etched with the scars of molten lead, often mused in his soft, wry way that such secrets were like the wind felt, but never fully grasped, carrying with them the promise of knowledge unbound. As the type was locked into the press, the artisans inked the forms with brushes made from fine animal hair, the liquid spreading evenly across the metal surfaces, with a sound like silk being drawn over stone. The first impression was always a moment of held breath. The press lowered with a steady turn of the bar, compressing the type against the parchment in a firm, unyielding embrace. When the sheet was lifted, the fresh print revealed itself in stark black lines, the ink still tacky and gleaming under the candlelight, carrying the faint, metallic tang that lingered in the air. Each page, once dried and stacked, became part of a larger whole, a Bible that might journey to cathedrals or remote monasteries, its words preserved for generations. The process unfolded with a lullaby like rhythm, the artisan's breaths synchronizing with the steady press of work, their smocks brushing against one another in a comforting cadence. Sensory details abounded. The cool touch of the type blocks, smoothed by hours of handling, the warm breath of the furnace that kept the workshop alive through winter nights, the distant toll of a church bell marking the hours, its resonance seeping through the walls like a gentle reminder of the texts they labored over. In the glow of the candles, one could imagine the pages coming to life, the letters forming not just words, but portals to spiritual realms, all while the mystery of those unseen orders hovered like a soft fog, inviting contemplation without disruption. Historical accounts from church ledgers, such as those from the University of Erfurt, detailed how printing revolutionized the dissemination of religious texts, allowing for Bibles to be produced in editions of hundreds, rather than the singular tomes of old. Yet in this shop, the focus was intimate, the artisans embodying a quiet dedication that transformed raw materials into vessels of faith. They worked through the night, the candlelight casting a golden haze that softened the edges of fatigue, their movements a blend of art and ritual. Subtle wit emerged in their shared glances, a knowing smile at the irony of iron and ink capturing the eternal, or the way a misplaced letter could alter a verse's meaning. Though such errors were rare and swiftly corrected. As the stack of printed sheets grew, the mystery deepened. For what of the patrons who requested these Bibles without leaving a name? church records from the 1480, preserved in the libraries of Florence, alluded to anonymous benefactors, perhaps merchants enriched by trade or nobles seeking penance, who funded prints that vanished into the world without fanfare. It was a puzzle that added a layer of allure to the craft, a whisper of the unknown that made each page feel alive with possibility. The artisans, in their smocks, continued their work. The rustle of parchment and the flicker of light, their constant companions, weaving a narrative of creation that felt both ancient and new. In the end, as the first light of dawn crept through the shutters, casting a pale glow over the finished choirs, the shop settled into a peaceful hush. The mystery of unwritten orders lingered, a gentle enigma that promised more stories yet to unfold, drawing the mind toward horizons beyond the press. And as the artisans stepped back, their labors complete, one might sense the quiet transition to what comes next, the wider world awaiting these sacred texts, where their influence would ripple like a stone cast into still waters.